it's some like peacocking from some men where they just kind of like want to, take their feathers out and are like, oh, look how much I know and stuff. And like, I'm prepared to swat people down with my knowledge. I'm prepared to do that. But like, that's only if it's like, that's a defense move, not an offensive move, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Welcome to Events Demystified podcast, where we explore and demystify the world of in-person, virtual, hybrid event AV production and technology by sharing insightful tips, tricks and tactics to make your events a success. This podcast is brought to you by Trifan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency. And your host is Anca Trifan, a technical event planner and producer with almost 2 decades of hands-on technical experience in event production.
Welcome to another episode of Events Demystified podcast, your one-stop shop for tangible, technical, and practical planning advice for anyone in the events industry. Today's episode is sponsored by Trifan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that provides the strategy, technology, and gear to host successful virtual and hybrid events. And I am your host, Anca Trifan. On the show with me today, I have Samantha Potter, an audio engineer and install empress, and she has been working with Allen Heat USA for quite a bit. She's serving as the manager installation and commercial audio with a diverse background in AV and IT, production management, and system design. She also serves as a senior editor and author for such as theme magazines as Pro Sound Web, Church Sound Magazine, and Live Sound International. Growing up as a classical musician, Samantha discovered live sound by the way of studio and eventually began developing curriculum for houses of worship while managing production of funk and R&B bands in the Midwest. Her show, Church Sound Podcast, can be found on all major podcasting platforms, and our previously recorded episode is actually number 39. I will post the link in the episode notes so you can go and check it out. In the meantime, let's welcome our featured guest in. Welcome to the show, Samantha. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. It's the only thing I've been able to talk about this last week is how hot it's been here. And we finally got a break in the weather today. So it's been pretty good. I'm doing well. How are you?
Not us, because I'm looking at our degrees that are just constantly going up. It was about 90 when I first started our conversation, and it got to 97. So I don't know what's happening, but it's pretty hot here as well. Where do you call home, Samantha?
Kansas City.
So when you say hot, like how hot does it really get?
Right now it's 88, and this is the break in the heat. So it's been like mid 90s. But what gets you is here we also have humidity, which makes it feel like it's like 104, 105. And we don't get that ocean breeze that other hot areas of the country get. So it just is a bit stifling at times. But
when it's hot, it's hot, and it's hot, and you know that it's hot.
Yes. It was like 106 or 107 at Infocom, and it was bearable. 195 here, humid.
No,
almost
too much.
Unbearable.
I totally get what you're saying, because I just came from Florida. I was there for a week, and it was in the 80s, 90s, but that heat combined with high humidity is totally like not my cup of tea. Here where I'm at, when it gets 97 and it's 100, 105, it's dry heat. I can put up with it. I mean, it's not comfortable, but I would definitely...
you can sweat appropriately. When it's humid, it like traps the humidity on you, and it's almost like hard to breathe because the air feels so thick. It's weird. Anyways, this is...
Well, hey, it's been a minute since I've seen you last, and we had a podcast together. We've also done a couple of live shows together for women in events, production, and technology. So catching up and, trying to like figure out like where we're at. This is great to chat, because really what I want to get to is how excited I am that I have you with me on this podcast, because I am starting and kicking off a brand new season, which is dedicated to few females in event productions and audio and video lighting, show calling, technical producers, stage managers, all and any roles that we found ourselves and our way into the field. So to get a little bit of background on your story, I would love to learn more about what possessed you to get into live sound and what keeps you here.
Yeah, boy, possess. That's probably a pretty good word for that. Yeah, so as it's kind of stated in my bio, I grew up a musician, and then I got into computers, and then as many of us have, like I got into studio work, and that was all well and fine. I was enjoying myself, but I was kind of pushed to try live sound by one of a professor I knew, and just to like understand the other side of the coin of like the pro audio industry, understand that. So I did, and ended up just like absolutely falling in love with the idea that you cannot have perfection. It will never be perfect. We strive for it, but there's an understanding of like, this has to happen right now. And this is when it drops, and like everybody hold your breath because things will explode. You could do everything right and it still go wrong. And like, that's part of the fun. It's part of the adrenaline of that, of live events. That's, I imagine, because you're doing it as well, you also have a seeker part of you that is that excitement of this could all explode in our faces, but I'm going to do it anyways.
It's probably the wild side of us, getting a little fed with that adrenaline that I totally agree. Like that excitement, and sometimes like even like this hole in your stomach, kind of like the size of like a huge pit of, oh my gosh, is this going to go well or is it going to go all crazy?
Oh yeah, I get lightly sick before every event.
Exactly.
Like, fine.
Oh, it's funny that we get attracted to that as like the madness of, before going live, before the show, goes on. And I love that it was a professor, someone that in a way tugged you to, give this field an option and maybe give it a try. I have someone like that, a mentor in my life too, when I was going to school to study live sound reinforcement, because I'm a by the book person. Okay. Like you see the library behind me. I love to read everything there is to read about something. So I can feel like I really understand and know, and then go into it full steam. I was going to school for live sound reinforcement, and I had a professor. And again, most of that is usually recording, because that's more, I feel like that's it's easier to control, and it's in more of a stable environment, especially when you're trying.
It's very scalable.
And you're trying to teach like brand new people how to mix, and you can do it again and again through sessions. It's not like you're on a stage and you're either gonna like tank the show or you're gonna rock it. I don't know if you want to find out how tanking looks like, in a real life situation. And I had a professor that sort of like brought in me this curiosity of what it looks like to actually apply some of the skills that I learned in the studio to a live sound environment. So tell me more about what that looked like to you. Did you feel like your first event was like one of the most exhilarating events, or more of a, oh my gosh, I don't want to go back to that?
It was kind of neither. It was definitely not the latter. I loved it a lot. Because I had already in studio work, had already been feeling this like a little bit of a push away, because I didn't like that there really is no excuse for things to not be perfect. And I like grew more and more in dislike with that, because I'm very hard on myself, and I could just like do this until I die. Like I could just work on this one thing until I die, because it'll never be enough. And I liked that live production like had an endpoint. Everything could be super bad and this could suck so much, but it will end. Like the finish line's right there. So if I can make it to there, I'll be good.
So you're not going to obsess over trying to get this to that level of perfection that, again, it's somewhat unattainable, because I don't personally believe in perfection either. I believe in excellence, like doing my best effort with the situation at hand and whatever the tools at hand, especially tools at hand, right? But to strive for this perfection that is not attainable, it's just such a hard weight on ourselves.
Yeah. And the second half of your original question is like, well, what keeps me here is this, a lot of my job has kind of shifted a little bit since I joined the Allen and Heath team. And now I work on like more of the manufacturing side. And that was I didn't even understand this part of the industry until I kind of like started looking into these kinds of jobs and eventually ended up here. And it was like, it really opened up this world even more. So now what keeps me is almost like a higher like view of all this is, yes, the adrenaline, yes, finish lines of sorts, but it's like problem solving, helping people, and having like a little tiny piece of me someplace. Like that suddenly means a lot, that I'm able to help people, understand the technology or help develop the technology or help with a design that like lots of people will be in and use and get enjoyment from. Like it looks a little bit different now, but I think the goals are all kind of the same. Is that just like you, like I have very high expectations for myself, excellence, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to continue that. It just like the day-to-day looks a little bit different. And I still, of course, like freelance and do stuff on the side, and I can still get that really gritty, like, drop of the event is happening right now kind of deal. But yeah. That's what's keeping me here.
So what I hear between the lines is you really love the idea of this impact, even though it might be at a smaller scale, but still in long term could be a large scale, because there's not a lot of women out there that can say, well, I had a say in building this piece of gear or of equipment or whatever it is that it's going to power your line array, or whatever it is, this maybe mixer or processor that is going to make your life easier or it's going to make your life better, and having impact in that's what it sounds attractive to me. And you tell me if it's what actually it's something that speaks to you as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you like almost 100% of the way. I would just say on top of that, like it's almost like I have a bigger influence now. I'm seeing more, doing more things, and God bless Alan and Heath, they keep letting me do stuff. So
that's awesome.
So I do, whether it's webinars or videos or out at trade shows, like I get to meet more people. So between Alan and Heath and like ProSun Web and everything, like I get to touch so many people's lives in some way or another, whether it's just shaking their hand and having a conversation with them, or it's we go down that product line and it's helping develop something, make this firmware a little bit better, or finding something over here, or an article we're editing. It could be so many things. So I feel like this helps me have an even larger reach to hopefully, to what you were saying, show other women, young women and girls that it's like, this is like totally a career. There's so many jobs that you're not even thinking, and I didn't even realize that exist right now. There are others like you out there, and there's so many opportunities.
I love that. And I'd love to touch a little deeper into that. Before we get there, let me ask you something else, because again, in the position that you're in the niche that you're in the field that you're in, I'm just curious, and also, drawing from your years of working live events, I can only imagine that you've worked with so many different type of people coming from diverse backgrounds and even belief systems, as well as talent. So what is, in your opinion, the secret to managing intense, not to say difficult sometimes, personalities and keeping your cool under stressful or maybe demanding situations?
Yeah, that is something I'm like still like working on. I feel like I've gotten so much better as I've like gotten well into my late 20s, the end of my 20s. I feel like I've even got a better grasp on it now than I did when I was younger, but because it can be frustrating. But I think I try to keep in mind that for the most part, like people are kind of trying their best. Maybe they're not having a good day, or you have no idea what's really going on, or maybe a lot of times there's a communication problem. I try to keep that in mind. Sometimes people just like genuinely do suck that much. Whatever you're seeing that's just them. So I try to meet them where they're at and say, okay, this person's not my favorite human in the whole world. And given the option again, I probably wouldn't work with them. And I'm going to keep that in mind. But really just having a little bit of patience, making sure that I'm like, that you communicate that I'm doing my part to help this relationship as much as I can, so that it cannot be said that I didn't make an effort. And then beyond that, it's like being professional. You never want to burn bridges unless some serious lines in the sand have been drawn. And we should all have boundaries and lines, and once those get crossed, like you're done. But for the most part, it's kind of out there a bit. But then just taking a deep breath, getting through it. Again, like I said, being professional. And then at the end of the day, complaining heavily to my significant other. So it's like, man, like this happened and this is ridiculous.
Can you imagine this thing that happened to me today?
nuts. Like this oh my gosh, like that is honestly so therapeutic. It's just, especially, I highly recommend having a significant other that's not in the industry. So there is zero way that there are any repercussions other than therapy, like coming from that conversation. So yeah, that's how I typically try to do it. And
I
you know,
feel
you
like
never
I go
know.
back and forth with that. Like
Mm.
I don't have a significant other that works in the industry. Sometimes I wish that they did, because
Same.
some things that I'm dealing with can only be understood if you are in the same place, niche
Yeah,
situation.
for sure.
So sometimes I get frustrated just trying to explain and not getting the reaction that I'm kind of expecting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It takes a little bit of education on our part. So yeah, my wife is a social worker, so very opposite, and is actually like the field is very women heavy. Like there's very few male social workers actually, at least where we live.
Yeah.
And so like
So the
her
dynamic that
problems
she's used to is completely different than your dynamic
so
that
different.
you're.
Our issues like fundamentally are the same, but like our approach has to be kind of different because the situations, like the people surrounding them, are so different. But
Yeah.
yeah, we've been together a very long time, so she knew what she was getting. Like it's fine. It's been like 12 years, so she knows a lot more than she probably wants to know
It
as far
sounds
as
like
the
she's also more
technology.
patient, which helps people like us that have a little feisty personality to just like, okay, all right, like breathe.
Yeah, yeah. And I can do the same for her. I can reciprocate it because I'm totally removed from it. I'm not like I'm not in wherever she's at. I'm not dealing with the same problem. So I have a totally third perspective on it, and she can offer that to me. So that's really helpful. So recommend it. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes it'd be nice if they also worked in the field, but I think more often than not, even just like schedule wise, I'm glad she doesn't. So
That's awesome. Well, let's go back to the pro audio world, and having worked as a pro audio installer, what would you say is, and this is just a curiosity question, because come on, like, what would you say is the ratio of women to men working in this particular niche? Because let me just tell you, I have done my years in live sound and have dealt with a lot of providers and installers, and it's not one of the places that most women are drawn to. And I will have a piggyback question to that, but I'm just curious, like in what you're seeing, where you're at right now in today's times.
It's all dudes. It's like
Short
it's just like
answer,
yeah,
dudes.
it's all dudes. Okay, so I think like it's still we're at about in live sound. I think we're still like 5% women. Like it's gotta be that or less in integration and installation and stuff. Like
Yeah.
I'm just like never running into when I do run into women. There have been a few over the last couple of years that have like that are doing designs and doing like really important stuff, but they are unfortunately few and far between. So I try to like really like take a second to like acknowledge each other, like hello, I see you kind of deal. But yeah, it's heavily men, and we're working on it. But that's I've always kind of worked in.
So how do you approach a situation like this? And many times, I would see some of your posts on LinkedIn or Instagram where it is exactly how I would expect that it would be. Showcasing a piece of gear or a new mixing board, a digital board, or whatever other processing a new piece of gear that's out there, especially at the trade shows that you've been going to. And then there's like a sea of heads, and they all look like guys, especially from the back. How do you come across as a confident, knowledgeable person while also being somewhat likable? Because I feel like for us women in this field, there is a really different measuring stick when it comes to coming across as competent, knowledgeable, but also likable.
Yeah. So I consider myself pretty like likable, just like how I like live day to day. Pretty much like if I don't like you, like I think people will agree that there's something wrong with you. Like I'm just like I try to I'm not problematic. I really try to be friendly. Like I said earlier, meet people where they're at and just try to have an understanding because I like getting along with people. I don't love conflict. But it's basically like I come in, like if let's say I'm meeting like a new group of people, like I basically have to gauge how these men are going to react to me, and I have to adjust accordingly. I'll go in like professional but friendly every single time it's somebody new until they tell me or they show me that I need to act differently. So sometimes it's some like peacocking from some men where they just kind of like want to, take their feathers out and like, oh, look how much I know and stuff. And like, I'm prepared to swat people down with my knowledge. I'm prepared to do that. But like, that's only if it's like, that's a defense move, not an offensive move, if that makes sense. Like, that's never how I want to present myself normally. And the longer that I'm kind of in the positions that I'm in where people like see me doing stuff, the less often that seems to need to happen, because people kind of know who I am and they like understand why I'm there and what I'm doing, rather than just like some lady off the street, I guess. Which, that's its own set of problems. But
absolutely. But just coming to a new circle is sometimes there is a little bit of that measuring, like you said, of like, okay, so how much can a little girl know about amplifiers?
Yeah.
And you get that attitude, right? Until you actually show them that you know something and maybe more than what they do know. And then it's almost like you feel that energy, where the vibe initially, it's all like, what are you going to teach me, And then once you really show, because you really know your stuff, that changes, the attitude changes of how you're perceived.
Yeah. Like sometimes they'll be at like at a dinner or lunch or something, or at a meeting someplace else. And, I try to keep myself a little bit more reserved, I guess would be the word. I try to withhold a little bit of myself so that I can gauge what this relationship is going to look like, so that I can save a piece of myself for the people who deserve it. And, things kind of like that. And so then we can start engaging. We can have a very serious conversation about like technology. And that usually will open a few doors of like, their understanding. They're going to try to gauge my understanding or what we're trying to get out of the conversation. And it's always nice when we reach a point where we can start kind of like joking around, because I like being like friendly in that way. But it's always, again, you have to kind of go in kind of proving yourself, I guess, is like making sure that they take me seriously, I guess, is what it boils down to.
And I feel like that can be very tiring for a lot of women. No wonder that those fields are not necessarily, the fields that women will flock towards. So I guess the piggyback question to the initial question would be, what can be done to change the status quo and give more opportunities to women in this field, or maybe make it more attractive for women to flourish in this field?
Yeah, that's such a it's going to be a complex answer. It's a complex question, but it has to kind of start looking like the men have to make the first step forward to like creak the door open so that more women can get in. And then once that shift happens, it'll kind of start to take care of itself. But we have to make sure that we are letting women, young women and girls, like know these are opportunities that you can have. This is what your life can look like if you go down this route, and things like that, and getting them more in. And then I think just naturally, because of the way that the differences between how men and women or males and females, or we could really go down and start divvying this up, but how like our brains process information so differently between the sexes is stark when you start getting in these traditionally very boys club sort of scenarios, where it's like, well, what if we didn't do that? Or like, this is how it's coming off to me, like right now. Like there have been plenty of times where I was the first woman to get into this particular group. And after a while, like I have to do some of the lifting to make sure that I'm saying, hey, like that came off wrong, or this looks bad, or this is what I was receiving. Is this what you were saying to me? Because this is what it sounded like. And trying to help recalibrate them. And then once they're aware of it, it's like suddenly they become like beacons of like change in their other areas. And that's really helpful. So it's always just trying to get more women in the door and recognizing that this is a great field to be in. And there's lots of positions, and you can, have great work-life balance if you want it. Or if you want to do something thrilling, you can do something really thrilling and adventurous, or something really stable. Whatever kind of life you want to have in pro audio, you can have it. And that's one of the best things, but we just need to make sure that we are getting women in and not beating them down so much that they end up leaving, because that's the second half of the problem. Okay, we've got them in, but then it's either the wrong job for them, or more often than not, it's the wrong team, the wrong teammates for them, or the wrong manager. And then they get turned off, or they get kind of jaded, and I can't blame them. all the time. But that's not a complete answer, but that's where we can start.
No, absolutely. And I think, it does take a little bit of, forming a bit of a resilience, as you are sticking around and you're sticking to your passion and your belief that you belong there. I know.
Oh, man.
Belong.
As you're talking, I just remembered, like, one of the best things I've ever adapted to myself is the ability, is not only having thicker skin, so the resiliency that you were talking about, but it also having boundaries still, but welcoming criticism and not personalizing that, because I did that, especially when I was younger, horrifically. And now I welcome it fully into my arms. Like, yes, I can't wait for our review cycles. I'm like, yes, like, let's get in there. Like, let's tell me all the things that I could do better. I want to mess up. Like, seeking those out.
Because you switched this, basically turn on the switch from this is personal, addressed against me because I'm not good enough, versus no, this is a growing opportunity. This is a great learning lesson. Exactly.
Yep. I'm going to be better tomorrow or in 10 minutes because this thing I'm going through right now, I'm going to be better in 10 minutes. And I wouldn't have been if I didn't go through this. And like, I think a lot of like men think that way, like just naturally.
But not us women. We take it so hurtfully, painfully personal, and then it's all about our worth and how there's like this imposter syndrome that plays with our mind. And all of this is kind of more of a internal talk, dirty talk that we do to ourselves.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And so flipping that switch has been one of the most powerful things I've ever done for myself, for my own sanity, for my career, of just like really welcoming this after, like decades of being praised for perfection, like behaving and all this stuff when we're really, really young. That grows into imposter syndrome and trying to get this unattainable thing that we'll never get. And then we're hard on ourselves. So double-edged sword. When we're hard on ourselves, we get really pushed and we can do amazing things. But if we aren't careful, we can end up hurting ourselves in the process. Or if we just don't quite hit the mark, instead of going, woohoo, I made it 90%, we're like, failure, I should die. And it's like, that's a really hard to unlearn. But sorry, as you were saying all of that, I was like, yes, flipping that switch, welcoming criticism and not taking it personally. It's so much easier said than done, but my goodness, powerful.
Well, Samantha, hold that thought. I love where we're going with this conversation. We will take just a brief moment to acknowledge our podcast sponsor and supporter, and we will be right back to continue this fascinating conversation. Before we move any further, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our main sponsor, Trifan Events, which is a boutique event planning and production agency that will come alongside you, offering personalized event planning and technical support, strategic event design, production and technology management, and flawless execution for live, virtual, and hybrid events. The team at Trifan Events is passionate about planning and producing event experiences that get people involved with true moments of interaction, engagement, and co-creation, while offering white glove treatment throughout the entire planning process, enabling you to reach your event goals with the use of creativity, production tools, and event technology. Find out how Trifan Events can plan and produce your event become memorable. Go to trifanevents.com. As we're picking back up on our conversation earlier, in my experience, and probably in yours as well, there are very few women working in technical event production, whether that's, in A1 or A2 audio roles, video roles, streaming, engineering.
I feel like I see lighting a lot, and that's...
Or lighting, I feel like a little bit more so than those more technical roles. And maybe whether that it's a direct result of this lack of maybe a lack of visibility, or people continuing to be surprised when they see women arriving on site. And I've had in my experience people tell me, I've had people that actually come to shadow whatever part of the event that I was doing. And then they were questioning whether I'm really the one that they're supposed to be shadowing, or I've had other sound engineers, tell me like, don't worry about this technical side or the finer details of this complicated workflow, because this is not the type of thing that someone like you needs to know. Again, not every encounter has been negative, of course, but there's plenty of examples, a little bit of a microaggressions, I would call them, that would happen. And I feel like for me, the biggest thing, as you just mentioned, working with a supportive team or working with a supportive tech crew that has displayed equal treatment. And there is no doubt that we're all here to do a great job. And just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I'm less knowledgeable or less technical than my male counterparts. And I'm just curious, from your experience, have you encountered any of those challenges, and how were you able to overcome them?
At this point in my career, I can be pretty sassy with microaggressions and it not reflect badly on my career. When you're first starting out, there's a little bit like you gotta kind of like stay in your lane, and I have to do that less now, which is cool. There's still lane staying. Don't, let's not completely throw that out, but it's always, choose the hill you die on kind of deal. But there's always like, I was actually a little bit concerned about these run of trade shows, because I was like, oh gosh, like, because some companies hire what are called like booth girls, who are running the reception, and they're probably the only women in the company, or or there or whatever.
Right.
So I was like, oh my gosh, like I hope I don't get like, I hope this doesn't come back to bite me. Whether I was like basically the only woman on the booth at every trade show. Or that there was one, our biggest one, there was actually several of us, which was quite nice. But
that's good.
Just like looking around at other booths, you see like pretty dude heavy. So I was worried about that. And at one of the trade shows, like I got a snarky comment from somebody, and I'm sure that he thought he was just like, he just said what came to his mind, which that was the mistake. And that was fine. And I just quickly like swatted him down, like with a smile on my face, like, no, like I'm actually the only person who can help you in this booth for what you're looking for, kind of deal. Right. And they're always kind of like, oh, like, and then they're embarrassed, which is fine. You deserve to be embarrassed. And so doing things like that, or when they try to do that peacocking thing where it's like, well, I know this and that. It's like, okay, well, if you want to do this like sword fighting of information, we can do that. I'm prepared to, on certain extents, like, I don't know everything, but I'm not a complete doofus. So taking it with a grain of salt, knowing the context, where I'm at, who I'm talking to, what things are going on, that this is all part of the puzzle. But even if it's a little embarrassment, good, they'll learn something from this. And if it's a hard conversation, then it's a hard conversation, and we can do that, and hopefully they walk away a little bit more informed. But I'm happy to say that it seems like, at least in the like integration, installation, commercial audio side of and even some of the like house of worship side of pro audio, has been getting better. It doesn't happen to me as often. I still hear stories, of course, and as I've mentioned, like the more I'm like out there doing stuff, the more that people kind of know me, and so there's like it just happens less to me now, but that's not to say that it's happening less here. It's just from my understanding, that's what's going on.
Absolutely. I wonder if you also get sometimes like those, messages from women out there in the field, again, we're dealing with women all around the world, especially both of us having a show, a podcast that it's out there. And I personally, get many time messages from other women that are just honestly asking for advice. Hey, I've got this situation. I don't know how to deal with it. I'm curious if you happen to have someone and you're just people like messaging you, especially women, and just asking, like, honestly, I don't know how to advance in this field because this is the type of challenges I'm encountering. I'm wondering if you have any tips, solutions, if you've had this experience, and what have you done, because as much as we want to offer those opportunities for women, we also have to be ready to provide the support for some of the challenges that personally we've faced. And I feel like both me and you like we're way past that, but there's a lot of women that are just starting into many of those fields that for them is like a brand new thing and a surprise and sometimes a shocker, and no wonder that, like you said, it's hard to keep them there.
So I've met a young woman, her name is Rachel, at NAB this year. And she's like just starting out and like had run into a few people who weren't super awesome, but we connected. NAB, we traded numbers. I get messages like on LinkedIn or Facebook a lot of times, or Instagram. People just kind of like asking for some assistance, or in one of the many audio group chats that we're all in. And I really try to hear them, to really listen to them and hear what they're saying. Try to get them to understand that there are some like harsher realities to this field, even outside of just like sex or gender, like parity, like even beyond that, like just working in the field, period. What that looks like, what their expectations can be, the fact that they're going to need boundaries, and that we were talking about earlier, they'll probably need some thicker skin. And I try really hard to say that very delicately. Like, I hear you, I understand what you're saying. And at a certain point, you have to just say to yourself, like, that person sucks, and like try not to work with them anymore. And we can't do every
And it's not
like
a reflection of yourself, is their own things that they might be dealing with. And you have to take that at face value as it is.
Right. And so I don't want to, like, on one hand, I don't want to diminish like what they're telling me. Because that's not at all what's going on. But it's also like just a reality of working in a male dominated field is sometimes you have to be a little bit prickly. You have to have the boundaries up. You have to like kind of elbow your way through a little bit, knowing that not every person's going to be like this. The majority of people are not like this person you're having problems with. The majority of them are not like that. It's just a handful of them that stink and they're not fun to work with. But that's where you get other people like colleagues who are like-minded, or groups like Sound Girls, where you can go in and just kind of like blow some steam off, or get a mentor or a mentee and have kind of build those relationships with known good people, so that they're always there if you want to reach out or feeling a certain kind of way or just having a rough period. So
absolutely. Well, let's land this plane on a positive, uplifting note. I want to know, what are some of the maybe unknown opportunities for women that want to pursue a career in your field, in pro audio or any other field that you've traveled through on your journey so far?
Yeah. So integration as a whole, there's like so much work to go around. There has been for the last couple of years. It's seemingly looking like it's going to continue that way. There's so much work. You can work in integration. You can do design. You can have that like technical and creative side of you, but have a way more like normal, like a like work-life balance, a 9-to-5 sort of deal. You can get that. You can make good money, but you can also like be home on the weekends unless you like don't want to, and stuff like that. You can get that. So especially for anybody wanting to have like a family and that look kind of traditional, that's a great way to get it. Lots of opportunity there. I'll also say on the manufacturing side, there's like lots of a bit of a section of the industry, and there's only X number of brands, but like those have shown to be really interesting. Like whether it's like tech support, where you get to like really intimately know all the technology and trying to help people figure out how to use their microphone or their console or whatever it might be, Pro Tools, or helping design the equipment, or helping market the equipment, or even working in like being sales reps is a great way to make really good money, and traveling around an area and helping people find like the right products and with their designs or their projects, stuff like that. I would recommend looking there. Those are kind of unknown to many women right now, I think.
Is the way to get your foot into the door, is education in that one particular field the way to get into the door, or is it more making relationships, knowing the right people, or maybe being hands-on in a technical field? Maybe it's, let's say, pro audio or like mixing, right? And then you end up working for like an Allen and Heath. I'm just curious how much of having education matters in one area or another.
If you work in like really specifically like AV integration, there's lots of certifications, there's lots of badges and certain things you can get like that. That's a super great way to get in. But I would even say, like, if you're starting like fresh, brand new, is to just reach out to some of your local manufacturers reps or your local integration companies and say, hey, like, I'm eager, I love learning, what can I do to help you out? And a lot of times, like, they'll pay for you to get all these certifications or will help you go through all this training. And that's the absolute best way. It's like, go get your free stuff, go get your Dante training, at least levels 1 and 2. You could go get like Sure RF certified. You can go learn different processors and how they work. They've got certifications, and just getting the idea, like getting kind of like a lay of the land, so to speak. And that will put you really high up. And then it's just about going out and learning as much as you can and getting your hands dirty. So.
Absolutely. I remember when I first transitioned into mixing on digital boards versus on analog, Yamaha was offering, and this again, I'm kind of dating myself, but Yamaha was offering those PM5D classes, free classes to get certified on their top of the line at the time mixing boards. But that's what actually propelled me into understanding this one console, and then from there applying general knowledge to mixing on so many other different brands and different versions of a digital board. And it was that free certification training that I got that really got me passionate about an area and a space and a place and a technology that I wasn't yet comfortable with using. And I totally love the idea of like getting certified on some of the things that you can apply to other areas is so important. And like you said, nowadays, because of the interconnection of AV with networking, having the ability to understand that, especially if you come from the analog world, is so important. I mean, I personally know that as an audio person, having to dive into the video production world, thanks COVID, which was like, what is happening to me? Having had that workflow in my mind, it was an easy transition. As much as video is not really my favorite place to be in, but it has helped me immensely over the last couple of years to just do the type of events that now I get to pick and I get to be more hands-on than if it wasn't for that to be an actual thing. So let's transition a little bit into this pro audio world and how it connects to events. Because in my experience, affordable, high quality pro audio seems more like an oxymoron. And as HD video and audio became so prevalent lately in the world of events, especially with virtual events, and the industry, you know, now is grappling with the idea and the necessity and ways to deliver sharper than live images and crystal clear sound that the audience now demands, because we can't just put up with, you know, crappy sound anymore, but also on a budget. From your experience, you know, working with so many houses of worship, which let's say some of them are on a very tight budget, but also contributing and writing so many articles to the magazines that we mentioned earlier, Pro Sound Web, Church Sound Magazine, Live Sound International. Do you have any tips on how event managers, event planners, event professionals can improve the quality of their audio production for their events without breaking the bank?
Yes. So blanket kind of statement here. Like once there's a lot of nuance in really like higher end technologies. I'm going to go ahead and say that like once you've entered into the digital domain, that is good enough to start. So whether that's you get a little like digital, like single rack audio processor, or you want to go the way of a whole console with faders and stuff. Entering into the digital world, it now becomes much more important for you to understand how to use the tools rather than having as many possible tools at your disposal as you possibly can. Knowing how to use the tools, the fundamentals, are going to take you so much further. Now, there's definitely conversations to be had, like in converters and like preamp quality and stuff like that, and sample rate. There are great reasons, and those are great conversations that will be much longer than this podcast could possibly be right now. But if you are on a shoestring budget and you're just trying to like get some better quality audio, as long as you've entered into the digital domain, you understand the tools that you have in that digital domain, then it becomes addressing the sources. So whether that's getting a better microphone. We were having a super fun time with microphones before we hit record because I was trying to like do a shortcut, and guess what? It didn't work as good. So you start doing.
And I love it when that happens to us, you know, especially as sound engineers, and you're like, doing it.
I'll do it the right and the long way. So it's getting a source. So better microphones, better placement of the microphones, or just truly, if it's just like a better operator, so somebody who understands like cues and hitting things at level balances more appropriately, doing that, like that can take you so far. And then you start going into, okay, well, I've got the right mics. We know how to use them. We're doing all that. I know how to use the processing tools that I've got, like, but it's still not getting where I need it to be. Then it's like, okay, well, now we enter into that nuance. Like, you want to upgrade and go this direction, maybe now I want to start using a Q or an SQ console because I want more processing capabilities live. I want to do more, or I want to have lower latency, or I want to have
multiple
a better workflow.
Inputs, or even in cases
inputs.
of events.
Yeah, the workflow is huge, is a really big deal too. That changes a lot from board to board and manufacturer to manufacturer. But those are really excellent starting points of just, I'm trying to produce events. I don't need the absolutely most fanciest tool, even though they're a lot of fun. I can't always have, a Lamborghini. Sometimes I need a bicycle. Like sometimes the bicycle is just.
Sometimes I just need to get from A to B, and a bicycle will have to do.
Yeah. So truly, like understanding the fundamentals, getting yourself into the digital domain, and getting things at the source. And you're going to get over 50% of the way there, like 75% of the way there. And then that last 25% is what's really hard. It's what's really hard to get. So
where do you see the future of pro audio heading, and how do you think will that impact maybe, the future of events?
Everything's going networked, if it wasn't already clear.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's like, it's going to get to a point where networking is going to be so commonplace. Like it's going to be the absolute bare minimum expectation. And we've already kind of, for new people coming in, like you probably should, that everything connected other than like literally like a mic it's sitting in front of somebody like this, a mic sitting in front of somebody going into the preamp, like that will be the only analog cable. And it will be digital and networked the rest of the way. That's where it's going. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually the microphones also turned purely network. We already have networked microphones in integration land, but even just like right in front of me or like on tours and stuff, those will be networked eventually. And so understanding like networking as a whole. And then the other side of that is like our processing power is just going to continue to increase. So we'll be able to take more that we've heard of and used in the studio world into live event production that we weren't able to before because purely the processing power wasn't there or was too costly. And so, there's lots of things like multi-band compression was like not a thing in live sound for years and years.
Yeah, unless you wanted to bring your racks of outdoor gear, and it was like racks and racks and stacks,
Yeah. And so trying to move that into the digital domain takes a lot of time, a lot of processing power, a lot of R&D. Like it's just, there's so much to it. But we're getting to the point now where it's like the bar is dropping, so we're able to do so much more with so much less. So then it becomes understanding more techniques, more tools, understanding like it's not just about when we're on analog boards, as you well know, like you get in there, and unless you have a bunch of outboard gear, like you have the 3 bands of EQ, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 of them is variable, switchable. That's what you have, and you make it work, and it's going to be great. So that's kind of a bit of another double-edged sword. It's like now we're going to have even more tools, so we're going to be even more prone to like way overdoing it instead of stripping it down and understanding why, when, where, and how we use specific tools. So that's where I'm seeing it going. It's all networking and more horsepower, but that means we have to exercise more knowledge and more constraint.
And sometimes exactly less is more.
Oh yeah. That's almost always.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation so far, Samantha. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your experience and your learned wisdom and your tips. And in closing, I'm just curious if you have maybe one piece of advice that you would like to put out there for any other, female that would like to maybe pursue a career in pro audio and live events, or anything else that would be helpful for them as they plan maybe a step into a new future.
Yeah. Stay hungry and don't let anybody rain on your parade. There's as much as you could possibly want to do in this field, you can do. However high you want to go, you can go. However much you want to learn, it's constantly changing for better or worse. There's always something new. If you keep that hunger, if you always wanting to do a little bit better, learn a little bit more, keep that with you. And don't let other people whose lives aren't great or who are stuck or having a bad time, or who are just simply reacting to your existence in the field. Don't let them like rain on your parade. Just let them continue to have a bad time. Let them go home to their terrible life, and you just continue forward, knowing that you will continue on. They are but a blip in your rearview mirror, and just move forward. And as like I said, as much as you want, whatever you want out of this field, you can have it.
You were just using one of my a trigger word that I had in one of my rants about like the rear view mirror. I had to definitely leave some people in my rear view mirror, for those reasons that you were just mentioning, the reacting to my existence, and it's not good enough for you. I am sorry, but I am not going to try and fix any of this because it's not my job to do so. Well, I would love to have you share places where you're at on social if our audience would like to connect with you.
Yeah, so LinkedIn's always good. That's becoming a really big pro audio space. If I'm on a social media platform, it's pretty much always like Potter Audio. I've just tried to keep it all nice and succinct. Instagram is where I'm at. Instagram and LinkedIn are where I'm at the most. Facebook, I am on there, but I'm drifting away from it happily and slowly. So those are good places. But otherwise, like whether you're hanging out on Person Web, reading some articles from us or from me, or you're interested in learning more about Alan and Heath stuff, we have lots of videos. We do mini master classes and webinars every Wednesday. You can just come and hang out in a Zoom call, very casual, and just come learn about something for 20 minutes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And thank you for making time to actually be part of the show. For everyone else that's listening, thank you for staying with us the whole way. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, but also, stay tuned for what's coming up. Next week on Friday, we release a brand new episode every single week.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to review it, rate it, and share it with other event professionals that could benefit from it. Connect with us on social at Events Demystified Podcast. We would love to hear from you and what you're up to. If you'd like to learn more about Trifan Event Services and find out if we're a good fit in supporting your event, can we help your event be successful with a 20-minute free consultation? Link in the episode's notes. Thanks for tuning in.